This story offers a terrifying glimpse into the terrifying experiences people have had on beaches around the world. The next time you go to the beach, remember that the ocean holds many secrets, some of which are best left undisturbed. Lisa has a story that still gives her goosebumps. It happened when she was a teenager on a summer vacation with her best friends. They rented an old beach house in a secluded area, hoping to spend a week soaking up the sun and surfing. The house was charming, but clearly past its prime. On their second night there, they decided to explore the nearby beach after dark. They were walking along the beach, enjoying the cool breeze and the sound of the waves, when they saw another house further along the beach. Unlike their own, it looked completely abandoned. Curious, they approached the house. Its windows were broken, and the front door was partially hanging. With a sense of adventure, they decided to go inside. The inside was moldy and filled with old, decaying furniture and cobwebs. As they wandered through the rooms, they felt an unsettling presence, as if someone was watching them. In the living room, they found an old, dusty photo album. The photos were faded, but it was clear that a family had once lived there. They flipped through the pages, their laughter turning to silence, when they noticed that the faces in each photo were scratched. It was creepy, but they dismissed it as a prank by previous visitors. In a hurry, they left the abandoned house and returned to their beach house. That night, they couldn't sleep, thinking about what had happened in the abandoned house. In the silence, they eventually fell into a fitful sleep, only to be awakened by strange sounds. It sounded like footsteps and whispers coming from the direction of the abandoned house. They looked at each other with fear and anticipation, feeling that there was something very wrong on this beach. A friend suggested that they go back and take a look out of curiosity. They agreed, and they returned to the abandoned house. They entered the house and gathered around a dimly lit lantern. In the living room, they grabbed the photo album to try to understand more about the creepy house. Suddenly, while looking at the photos, they saw shadows moving on the walls. They didn't say a word out of fear. In this terrifying silence, they heard slow, deliberate footsteps coming from upstairs. Lisa said that they should get out immediately. They headed to the front door, but suddenly the door slammed shut, trapping them inside for a few moments. They managed to open the door and get out. Terrified, they ran as fast as they could to their beach house. They sat inside, discussing what had happened with worried expressions. Was what they saw real? The next morning, they found footprints in the sand leading from the abandoned house to their home, stopping right in front of their door. They packed their bags and left as fast as they could. They later learned from the locals that the abandoned house was known to be haunted. The family who lived there had disappeared without a trace many years ago, and since then, those who dared to get to know them have reported strange incidents. The thought of it still makes Lisa shiver, and she'll never forget the feeling of being watched through those empty, broken windows. This is Mark, and he wants to share a story that still haunts him to this day. It happened about 5 years ago on a beautiful California beach where he and his friends used to hang out every summer, Mark says. We were a tight-knit group of 5, and that summer day started out like any other, full of the excitement of surfing, swimming, and enjoying the sun. The beach was alive with life. Families playing in the sand, surfers catching waves, and the sound of laughter all around us. It was one of those perfect sunny days where everything seemed to be going well. As the day progressed, we noticed that the usual sounds of the beach were suddenly interrupted by a commotion near the lifeguard tower. Curious, we walked over to see what was going on. A swimmer had disappeared, and lifeguards were organizing a search. The atmosphere was tense, and the usual chatter on the beach had subsided, replaced by the anxious murmurs of onlookers. Lifeguards were frantically checking the water, and people were helping by looking along the shore. We decided to join the search, hoping that we could find the missing swimmer with more eyes on the water. Hours passed with no sign of the person. As the sun began to set towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand, most of the searchers gave up and began to leave. The once crowded beach was now eerily quiet. Despite the growing darkness and chill in the air, we decided to stay a little longer, thinking that maybe, just maybe, we could help. The mood among us was somber, and I could tell we were all nervous, hoping for a miracle but fearing the worst. Just as we were about to end our day and head home, something caught my eye farther out in the water. There was a person, just a faint silhouette against the dim light, waving his arms frantically, as if in distress. My heart sank, and I shouted to the others. Pointing to the person, we all began shouting to the rescuers, who quickly responded by launching a rescue boat. We watched anxiously as the boat hurtled towards the figure. For a moment it looked like they might reach whoever it was in time, but as the boat approached, the figure seemed to sink beneath the waves and disappear completely. We stood there, frozen in disbelief, our eyes fixed on where the figure had just been. The lifeguards searched the area thoroughly, but came up empty-handed, baffled by the disappearance. There was no sign of anyone in the water, no trace at all. We were all shaking, and decided it was time to leave the beach. That night I couldn't get the image of the figure out of my mind. I tossed and turned in bed, replaying the scene over and over. The way the figure moved, the desperation in the way it waved. It seemed so real, and yet it just disappeared, as if it had never been there. The next day, still reeling from the memories of what we had witnessed, I spoke to a local who had lived in the area for years. What I learned sent chills down my spine. He told me that the beach had a tragic history. Years earlier, a young man had drowned there after being caught in a strong current. His body was never found, despite extensive searches. Since then, there have been numerous reports from beachgoers of seeing a ghost in the water, always in the same spot where the young man drowned. I realized that what we saw was not a living person, but the spirit of that drowned swimmer, always trying to call for help that never came. That realization left me cold, and I haven't been able to look at the ocean the same way since. Even now I sometimes dream of that beach, of that moment when the ghost disappeared beneath the waves. I wake up in a panic, the sound of the ocean still ringing in my ears, and the eerie image of that ghost swimmer still fresh in my mind. So the next time you find yourself on the beach, enjoying the sunshine and the waves, remember that the ocean holds many secrets, some of which are best left untouched, because sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. This story is just a glimpse into the terrifying experiences people have had on beaches around the world. The next time you go to the beach, remember that the ocean holds many secrets, some of which are best left undisturbed. This is Jake, and he has a story that has haunted him for years. He has never shared it with anyone outside his close circle of friends, but he thinks it's time to let it go. It happened to him a few summers ago while he was vacationing on the East Coast with his family. Jake says we were staying in a small picturesque beach town known for its quiet beaches and historic lighthouse. One evening, just before sunset, I decided to go for a swim. The beach was nearly deserted, and the golden light of the setting sun painted the sky a beautiful shade of orange and pink. It seemed like the perfect moment. As I swam further out into the ocean, I felt an inexplicable shiver run down my spine. The water was eerily cold, much colder than it should be on a warm summer evening. Suddenly I heard faint whispers, like distant voices calling to me. I stopped, walked into the water and looked around. There was no one in sight. I told myself it was just the wind playing with my mind and kept swimming. But then, out of nowhere, I felt something touch my leg. It wasn't seaweed or a fish. It felt like a hand. In a panic, I turned to swim back to shore as fast as possible. But the whispers grew louder, and the water around me seemed to be pulling me under. I was gasping and gasping for air, struggling against an unseen force. Just when I thought I was drowning, I felt a grip loosen. I managed to break free and swim back to shore, my heart pounding. As I stumbled to the shore, gasping for breath, I saw an old man sitting on a nearby bench. He looked at me with sad, knowing eyes and said, "You've met her, haven't you?" Confused and terrified, I asked him what he meant. He told me about a local legend about a young woman who drowned in the same spot I was swimming. Her body was never found, and her restless spirit is said to still roam the waters, seeking to drag unwary swimmers into the depths with her. To this day I can still hear those whispers in my nightmares, and I haven't gone swimming in the ocean since.